Hello, my name is Loredana Vlad, and I will present my paper towards an interdisciplinary perspective on the meaning of life. Transhumanism is a philosophical and intellectual movement that supports human bioenhancement with the help of new technologies. Summarizing the transhumanist ideas, the emphasis lies on the fact that a series of objectives of this movement are to prolong the life of the individual, to have a better quality of life, better memory. These objectives are not new in the literature, men attempting since ancient time to reach the condition of God, trying to imitate God and implicitly the divine work. We believe that people's ideals have not changed over the time, but so we consider that one of transhumanist goals could be the meaning of life is to obtain immortality. In this paper, we will bring to the fore a series of philosophical and theological arguments regarding the transhumanist projects of using new technologies in order to obtain the extension of life. One of the most important chapters in the Bible is the Genesis, because it contains the idea on creating the world and creating man. God created the world in 6 days, and the seventh he rested. Man was made of clay, and the Holy Spirit was breathed into him, and God said, Let us make man in our image, in our likeness, to rule over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the air, and over everything living thing. And he created man in his own image. The expulsion of Adam and Eve from paradise was due to disobedience, and they violated God's command not to eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. However, the first people obeyed the divine command, and at the urging of the serpent, they ate the forbidden fruit. People were driven out of paradise, and from that moment they tried to regain their lost paradise. It is considered that the First Testament is not only a history of divine intervention, but also of man's refusal and acceptance. Myths. In the literature, the myth is considered to be a true story, sacred, exemplary, and significant. Sacred tradition, primordial revelation, exemplary model. The story of a deed, as it tells us how something started to be. Myths or true stories have changed the world, changing the human condition, being considered an imaginary construction, story, representation, or idea which seeks to understand the essence of cosmic and social phenomena according to the intrinsic values of community and to ensure its cohesion. The first myth is Golem. One of the myths we want to emphasize in this paper is the myth of Golem. Attempts to create a superhuman are not new in human history, the individual being attracted to the idea of imitating the divine work. These attempts have been evident since ancient times, but a relevant history is presented during the Middle Age, where men wanted to create a being like Adam. The anthropomorphic individual named Golem was made of organic matter animated by its creator. The history of Golem is found in the early stage of Judaism and, like Adam, was created from clay. Power and wisdom were given by holiness and faith, but the individual who would create a golem could only be considered the shadow of what God represents, due to the fact that the created work did not have a soul and could not speak. On the other hand, having a golem is the ultimate symbol of wisdom and holiness, an aspect highlighted in the stories about rabbis during the Middle Age. It is supported that in order to make it work, they had to put the inscription imitate on their forehead, but deleting the first letter of the word actually forms mit, and in this way the golem could be disabled. Ultimately, golem represents on the one hand the limits of human power, and on the other hand the substitution of God. Regarding the symbolistic richness of the golem, both religion and scientifically nowadays, The most important aspect is the one related to ethics. The myth of Superman. Starting from the morality of slaves and masters, Nietzsche develops a model of understanding the strong man. I come to teach you what the superhuman is. Man is something to be overcome, not once forever, but always from the beginning, as the eternal return of the same. The Nietzschean superhuman has two interpretations. On the one hand, is about the interpretation given to this concept by Nazi ideologies, and on the other hand, about what is beyond man or what is above man. Each epoch carries in itself the superhuman, because each epoch is capable of evolution. The superhuman represents the future man, the one who will come, replacing traditional values, beliefs, and attitudes with new ones. With the phrase God is dead, Nietzsche creates a different kind of superhuman, an utopic individual who buries old values to give birth of others. The idea of death, of the divinity, does not represent the death of Jesus, but the collapse of a system of values. The superhuman is individualistic and self-confident, with a completely different behavior from that of the ordinary man. He loves life, creating new values that he respects, and does not run away from pain. The German philosopher considers that traditional values handcuff society and are characteristic of slave morality. In order to become a superhuman, the ordinary man must reject God from within himself, since the creation of the superhuman must, in fact, represent the entry to a new moral era, the era of the powerful. Nietzsche is convinced that traditional values represent a morality of slaves, the creation of the superhuman, representing the ultimate goal of existence on earth, provided that the old values are changed. The phrase, God is dead, appears in Nietzsche's work several times, the murder of God being the most repulsive and ugly man because no longer is needed of an external court. He forbids himself what was previously forbidden to him from without. He spontaneously covering himself with a police and some difficulties that not even seems to come from outside. Thus, the history of philosophy, from the Socratians and Hegelians, remains the history of a man-long submission, and the reason he offers himself in order to legitimize them. The death of God is also the overthrow. The Platonic hierarchies and the end of metaphysics would be equivalent to the end of being and of ontological difference. Overcoming metaphysics means overcoming difference, because difference is present only in the horizon of metaphysics, which makes the destiny of being a history possible. The superhumans thus overcome the expression of will and freedom. The transmutation of values can be considered a becoming, in the active sense of forces, as a triumph of affirmation within the will to power and under the rule of nihilism. The negative is the form of the will of power. Another chapter is about transhumanism. Transhumanism is a philosophical and intellectual movement that supports the increase of human capacities through new technologies. Regarding the subject of this paper, from all these technologies, we choose to talk about technologies of digitalization of consciousness. The myth of the superhuman becomes in transhumanism of the myth of bioenhancement. As stated earlier, attempts to transcend biological boundaries through technologies of digitalization of consciousness or extended longevity leads us to wonder whether there is a possibility that technological singularity does not come from the direction of artificial intelligence, but from discoveries about humans and humans' consciousness. Technological singularity would include, in this context, organic singularity, The digitalization of consciousness is an hypothetical concept that involves copying and passing information from the brain into the computer. The basic idea of this process is that once digitized, the new consciousness will be able to respond to stimuli in the same way as the original mind before being copied. The 2045 initiative aims to copy the human mind into a robotic device so that it can later be copied into the device, be they non-biological or biological. The developer of this program includes the possibility of digitizing consciousness, now later turned into a hologram. There is a clear distinction between the extension of life and the attainment of immortality. Immortality implies invulnerability of death, while longevity involves an immunological condition in the face of possible pathological factors, slowing down the aging process correlated with maintaining a healthy body, so that life is not just long but so qualitative. The digitalization of consciousness is a process of changing the current ontological condition. However, the process is not without risk, and the vulnerability of post-human condition does not only come from the chain of information viruses, but also by the fact that the understanding of human consciousness is impossible at the moment. There are also a number of doubts about digitalization and transfer of consciousness, as immortality is not a simple effect of a therapy. The development of science to eradicate incurable disease, at least so far, is not the same as obtaining immortality. Obtaining immortality with the help of technologies of digitalization of consciousness involves that man continues to try to imitate divine work and to reach a state of demigod. The conclusion of this paper. We have brought to the fore the two myths, that of the superhuman and of the golem, so that, starting from here, we may emphasize the fact that man continues to try to become like God himself. However, these technologies are human, and the attainment of the divine condition cannot be achieved only by digitizing consciousness. The Holy Book states that human justice is not the same as God's justice, and the technologies of digitizing consciousness emphasize the idea that the unlimited extension of life could not provide the condition of a God. There are a number of ideas, starting that the digitalization of consciousness would provide an opportunity for people who have committed illegal acts to be imprisoned in a virtual prison, and for this reason, we could continue to ask ourselves, would the digitalization of consciousness condemn us all to eternity? Thank you.